conferences, the one here and the one in Florida, because it marks the beginning again. And this year I'm particularly excited because, you know, we had such great momentum at the end of last year. September was a fantastic month for us. We had attendance numbers we haven't seen since 2014. And you know, the playoff format performed as we hoped it would. Our viewership was up about 10%, and we hope we can build on that momentum this year. It really is the first time since, if you think about it, since 2019 that we're going into a season where the focus is really on the field and on the play of the game, which is always when we do our best. I think we have a great opportunity to jumpstart the season with the WBC. The quality of players that are participating this year, I think, virtually ensure that it's going to be the best tournament that we've ever had. I've had occasion to talk to a couple of the people who are acting as general managers for various teams, and it's interesting. It's not a question of getting players to play, it's deciding who you're going to have play for you, which is really an embarrassment of riches for us. Rule changes, I think, going to make for an interesting start to the season. We listened carefully to our fans on this topic over a long period of time. We think the changes are going to produce a crisp, exciting game, more balls in play. I think the athleticism of our great athletes will shine through. And it's really not about changing the game. It's about making sure that we put the very best form of baseball on the field. I think the balanced schedule is another important change for us. We have a lot of great players, and I think in terms of making the sport more national, it's important that people in markets get more opportunities to see all those great players on a regular basis. Let me say one last thing about change, and I'll take your questions. I've learned over the years that when you try to change something related to the game, the initial reaction, there's always some negativity associated with it. But I think the playoff format is a great example of how change can make a great product even better. And I'm hopeful that what we're doing this year will have exactly the same result. Okay.
All right, if you have a question, John has a microphone. Just raise your hand, state your name and affiliation. We'll start with James to your left, Commissioner. He's in the third row on your left.
Hey Rob, how's it going? James
I'm
White.
good, James. I know you are. It's good to see
The New
you.
York Times. They said the state.
My eyes are bad. They're not quite that bad.
Just a two-parter going back to the balanced schedule. If you could explain just why you guys wanted to go back, do the balanced schedule for your division games, and then is it a matter of just getting someone like you want Judge to play in Cincinnati and Milwaukee, places they normally wouldn't go, and then as a result, like, do you think there will be any adverse effect on travel, fuel consumption as a result of more travel everywhere?
Well, remember, everything that you touch in this game has a trade-off associated with it. But it was more than just getting players into markets. 19 games against your division opponents. What we started to hear from the club was, it would help us in terms of attendance and appeal to our fans to have a little more variety in our schedule. So it was not just seeing the players, it was giving fans more variety in terms of the games that were available in their markets. The trade-off here, it is more travel. I mean, when you do more outside your division, almost by definition, your travel is going to be a little worse. And it's one of those trade-offs that the conclusion was it was worthwhile in terms of trying to make the game better for fans.
Any questions? Alan up front here.
Hey, Rob. Diamond Sports Group announced today that they're not going to make their mid-February interest-only payment to the...
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Diamond Sports Group announced today that they're not going to make their mid-February interest-only payments for the RSNs. I'm just curious just sort of what your level of concern is here with the ripple effects of them potentially going into bankruptcy, and just what do you see as sort of the fallout of that and where that will lead.
Yeah, look, the change, it's hard to escape the reality that the change in media consumption has been particularly hard on the RSNs. Obviously, we want all of our broadcast partners to be successful. We don't want them to have financial difficulties. And we have been spending a lot of time and effort trying to work with Diamond to figure out exactly where they are. Obviously our first choice would be that Diamond pay the clubs what they're contractually obligated to pay them. But because I guess I'm a contingency planner by nature, we are prepared no matter what happens with respect to Diamond to make sure the games are available to fans in their local markets. We think it will be both linear in the traditional cable bundle and digitally on our own platforms, but that remains to be seen. As I said, our first hope is that Diamond figures out a way to pay the clubs and broadcast the games like they're contractually committed to do. You can.
At this point, is it your expectation that they will be able to pay the clubs, at least while this process is playing out?
So far, what Diamond has been saying to us is that they intend to pay the clubs.
The questions? Right here, third row.
By the way, that's an unfolding story, right? Just because of the seasonality of the business, a lot of clubs have payments due between today and the first day of the season or the 1st of April. So, it's a day-to-day thing.
Hi, Jack Summers inside the Diamondbacks. If you're in a position where you do have to transition, as you just said, where MLB will be taking over the broadcasting, do you anticipate that you'll be able to replace 100% of the revenue that the teams are currently scheduled to receive?
Not in the short term.
Other questions? First row, and then Jeff.
Rob, Sam Blum from The Athletic. I'm curious, you released a statement after Artie Moreno said he was no longer selling the team was pretty complimentary.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Angels have lost a lot. They have a lot of lawsuits, scandals. But why is this a good thing for the Angels to not be sold?
Well, I think Artie, over a long period of time, has been a good steward for the game. He's been a valued member of the ownership group, has made contributions in that group. He has, I think, put forward effort in terms of spending to make sure that he's putting a good product on the field. He had an amazing run a number of years where he was drawn over 3 million people. There's a lot of success that had been had there, and I think a lot of the sort of negativity recently was a reflection back on the Angels, not a product of them doing anything inappropriate or improper. So, he made it, he had bidders, had the option, he made the decision he wanted to own the club, and I think that's a good thing.
Jeff up for right left.
2 questions. First, Rob, do you think the RSN model is salvageable?
Yeah, I think, salvageable is an interesting word. You always pick interesting words. I think this. I think for a period of time, there will be a legacy cable bundle model, including RSNs. It's going to be smaller than what we're used to, certainly smaller than it was in its heyday, but it's going to remain significant because there's economics associated there that are important to the game. Eventually, it may go away, but I don't think it's a short-term phenomenon. I think it's really important for the game to preserve the economics in the remaining RSN cable bundle while developing a digital alternative that has more flexibility and gives us better reach in terms of getting the fans who want to watch and don't have the ability to watch.
That was the second question. As the RSN model does get phased out, it's been the underpinning, seemingly, of the blackout rule. How big of a priority is it for you to, if not end blackouts, then at very least transition to a place where all fans can see games?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the last couple of years, if you had to say, give me one word that's Central Baseball's #1 priority, that word would be reach. And, you know, blackouts are the kind of opposite side of the coin of reach. We need to deliver product to fans who want to watch on platforms that they customarily use at a realistic price. That is our #1 priority.
Go to Chelsea in the second row on your right.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, I apologize if this is a dumb question, but if Diamond Sports Group can't pay the teams, what happens, and what happens in the event that you guys do have to broadcast games? Where does money go from and to?
Okay. Let me start with what happens if they don't pay. If Diamond doesn't, we've been really clear that if Diamond doesn't pay, under every single one of the broadcast agreements, that creates a termination right, and our clubs will proceed to terminate those contracts. In the event that MLB stepped in, what we would do is we would produce the games, we would make use of our asset, the MLB network. To do that, we would go directly to distributors, meaning Comcast, Charter, the big distributors, and make an agreement to have those games distributed on cable networks. My expectation is that as part of that negotiation, there would be a negotiation over price, and that probably gets back to the question about, you know, what the economics would look like, but we would also be seeking flexibility on the digital side, so that, you know, when you look at MLB.TV, you'd go in, you could buy your out-of-market package like you'd always have, but you'd have the option to buy up into in-market games, something that the fan has never had before, which I see as a huge improvement for fans. At least as in the interim period when it would be some group of clubs, pick your number, something less than 14, that model, we would essentially flow the economics through to the individual teams. Okay? That whatever happens, there would be no kind of, maybe the best word is for phrase is cross-subsidization. It would be, you know, what happens in your market, you're still getting the full value, whether it's digital or linear.
John Shea is in the last row on your right.
Hey, Rob, you mentioned in December you were going to reach out to the mayor of Oakland and discuss or, you know, find out what the latest is in terms of negotiations and the sticking points with the Howard Terminal. Where is that right now?
Look, I think that the best way for me to answer that, John, is to say I think that the focus since I spoke to you in December really has been on Las Vegas. The city has been really caught up in trying to work their way through these funding issues that I'm sure you've read about. But, you know, I talk to John Fisher on a regular basis, both about what's going on in Oakland and about what's going on in Las Vegas.
Well, if the focus is on Vegas, what is going on in Oakland? Is there anything going on in Oakland?
Yeah, look, there are still conversations going on between the A's and the city. I think, you know, the mayor needed a little time to newly elected to get settled. I think the focus in Oakland has been on the funding, particularly of the infrastructure side of the project. That needs to get solved in order for that project to go forward.
And affordable housing, is that still affordable?
Yeah, affordable housing, I don't think they are in agreement on the affordable housing issue. The threshold issue right now, I think in Oakland, is how to handle the funding for the infrastructure.
Is Fisher's preference to stay in Oakland? Is that a yes, no, a question?
I think Mr. Fisher wants to make the best deal to secure the future of the A's, whether it's in Oakland or Las Vegas. You know, they need a new stadium. I think that's kind of beyond debate. You know, if he had to rank them 1 and 2, you'd have to ask him that. I think he's focused on making a deal that will secure the future.
And just to clarify, you have spoken with the mayor?
I have not spoken.
You have not?
No.
So no communication whatsoever with the new mayor? Do you
I have
plan
not.
to?
Everything I've had out of the city of Oakland was as a result of conversations with John about their conversations.
Okay, so you don't plan, no plans?
I'm sure I will at some point, John. I just haven't done it.
A little bit further to your right, in the same row with Trent.
Hey, Rob, when you hear a team president in January say that his team already has 0 shot at contending or even being a winning team, what is your reaction? And also, do you agree with him that a quarter of the teams to a third of the teams have 0 shot before we have a pitch in spring training?
Look, I think that most people who pay attention to our game realize that we do have a disparity issue in the game, both on the revenue side and consequently on the ability to spend on players. I think sometimes in markets that produces frustration that leads to what I regard to be unfortunate comments, not helpful.
Hey,
Throw
Rob.
with Jay.
Hey Rob, Jay Cohen, Associated Press. What does a rollout look like to you guys in terms of ABS system? And does the league need to do more outreach to maybe catchers who kind of made their career on framing and stuff like that that are kind of nervous about this system that appears to be coming?
Yeah. Look, I think rollout is, I don't mean to quibble. I always get in trouble when I quibble, but I think rollout's the wrong word. We are really in the evaluation phase still with respect to ABS. Obviously, we're going to use it broadly more broadly in the minor leagues. There are issues that are still the topic of really considerable discussion within the ownership group, and even more that are going to have to be resolved in the joint committee process with the players. The framing issue is one of those. I mean, it's a legitimate concern on the part of at least a subset of players, which is reflected in the union's position, obviously. I do think that the alternate forms that we're using in the minor leagues, meaning full ABS and the challenge system, you know, when you have 2 alternatives, some of those alternatives are better at addressing issues. Obviously, the challenge one reduces dramatically the framing issue for catchers in terms of the value placed on framing. So, you know, more to follow on that one. But I think it's a mistake to automatically assume that, you know, ABS is coming on any particular time frame. We're still in the evaluation mode on that one. And as, you know, I talked about in my opening remarks, we have a lot of change coming this year. And we need to, I think, see how that all takes.
Up front on your left.
Claudia Collins, Sports 360 AZ. Going back to rule changes, you mentioned fan experience, but how do you balance catering to fans while keeping players happy and up to date on these changes? Yeah,
I mean, I would say 3 things about that. Number one, there's a lot of players who like a lot of the changes. I think it's almost impossible to find a rule change that is meaningful, that every player would say, you know, this is a good thing. It's just, it's not possible. Even, you know, people that work with me in the commissioner's office, you know, I mean, we're traveling around having meetings with players, and, you know, Raul Ibanez and CC Sabathia would disagree about what the pitcher was going to do, or what the pitch clock was going to do for pitchers as opposed to hitters. It's just, it's the nature of, you know, our game, the way the player complement is subdivided. What we have tried to do is proceed slowly, experiment, so that we feel that we have a good handle on what the rules are going to produce. That experimentation has the added benefit that many players have actually had a chance to play under these rules in the minor leagues. And then I think the last piece is the joint committee piece. I mean, obviously, I think it's over time will prove to be one of the most important changes in the basic agreement, to have that ongoing sitting committee where it's owners talking directly to players about how they see the game. That communication helps players accept, if maybe not agree, with change.
Questions, Jeff?
Rob, by most traditional measures, the San Diego Padres are a small market team, whether it's population or television market size. On the other hand, they have the third highest payroll in baseball this year. Are they the exception, or could they be the roadmap for other smaller market teams to work their way into the same status where the Padres are right now?
Look, I think there's real positives in the Padres story. I think that the investment that the club has made in talent has allowed them to grow their revenue to the point that they're a payor, will be a payor under the revenue sharing system this year. The trick for smaller markets has also always been sustainability. You know, hats off to Peter Seidler. He's made a massive financial commitment personally to making this all happen. And, you know, the question becomes, how long can you continue to do that? And what happens when, you know, you have to go through a rebuild? But they have done a really, really good job of capitalizing on their talent to drive the revenue.
I'm curious, with the automatic runner now being permanent for the regular season, how much thought was given to starting that in later innings, whether it's the 11th, 12th, or was it always just set in your mind that it was going to be in the 10th?
Yeah, no, there wasn't a lot of discussion about making alterations to the rule, starting it later. You know, I think it might be a rule that is the exception to what I said earlier. I think the clubs have come to the point where they prefer the rule. I think it saves them from, you know, putting excessive strain on the pitching staffs, or putting position players out there to pitch when, you know, they're really not used to pitching. And I think for the players, you know, it eliminates that really, really long game. So there's just a lot of consensus internal to the game that it is a good rule. And I think for fans, you know, it does bring focus at the end of a game. And I think that's a good thing over the long haul.
Couple more. I'll take the second row.
Hi, Evan Thompson, Sport Relay. We've seen the club versus country debate come up in soccer with international tournaments, especially with the World Cup this past fall. And now with the World Baseball Classic here, how do you feel about the whole club country when it comes to the World Baseball Classic?
Yeah, I think, I mean, do you mean playing as club teams as opposed to?
I mean more, does the player owe more to his pro club?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I thought you were talking about club soccer. I'm thinking, no, really, no. But look, I think this. I think that the results this year demonstrate two things. That a lot of players, not every single one, but a lot of players place tremendous value on an opportunity to play with their country's name on their chest. And I get that 100%. I think that the change this year is we have seen less resistance from clubs in terms of making players available and actually meaning it in terms of their availability to play. And I think a big piece of that is a credit to the professionalism of the staffs in the various countries, that you can actually work with the WBC staff in a way that allows the player to get ready consistent with the desires of an individual club.
Take a couple more. Stephanie is on your right.
Stephanie.
Hey, what went into the decision not to put Mike Clevenger on administrative leave while the investigation plays out?
Yeah, look, the decision whether or not a player goes on administrative leave is one we make jointly with the MLBPA, and it's not automatic. It is, you know, a product of what we know based on the investigation at that point in time. I just can't get into those details, but it isn't an automatic thing. It just depends on, you know, where we are, what we have.
And sorry, just to clarify, it was my understanding that the initial admin leave is a unilateral MLB decision and renewing it is a joint decision. Is that incorrect?
I think I used to know all of them like that. I think they're both joint. I think there has to be an agreement, but I'm not positive. I have somebody to get back to you about that.
Other questions?
But either way, whether we do it unilaterally, it is our view on that has always been it should depend on the facts and circumstances of each individual case.
Take a couple more.
Jordan Spurgeon, Sports 360 AZ. For the more casual baseball fan that maybe hasn't been following the offseason and isn't necessarily aware of all the new rules, what should they expect if they walk into a ballpark on opening night or just some random Tuesday during the season? What should they expect with all the new rules?
I think you're going to see a game that moves along with more pace. I think you're going to see more balls in play. I think that you're going to look at the field and see players positioned the way that most of us grew up seeing them positioned. And I really do think they're going to see a movement towards the very best form of our game.
We have two more. Anthony in the first row.
Right, Chief Pastrins, MLB.com. With regard to just your expectations for the adjustment period here in spring training to the new rules, was there any thought to a grace period at the beginning of the season, or was it too important to have consistency?
You know, we talked about this at length. I think we reached the conclusion that we reached because if you have a grace period, you effectively have 2 periods of adjustment, right? People are going to adjust to what the grace period rule is, and then they're going to have to adjust again to what the real rule is. You know, our experience in the minor leagues suggested we were just better off putting the rule in, enforcing the rule. And look, there is going to be a period of time. We're not Pollyannish about that, but we think we're better off enforcing the rule and moving through that period of adjustment as quickly as we possibly can.
All right, Commissioner, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
All right, the club representatives will be here at 3 o'clock. A couple logistical things. Outside the room, there's an iPad, so if you self-parked in the